Greetings, Father Campo here. I wanted to share with you today about the first Saturday devotion. Now, at least here in South Louisiana, most people I think know about the first Saturday devotion that we received from Our Lady of Fatima. And a lot of people come to Mass and they go to confession for it. But I've also noticed two things. Some people ask questions about what they need to do to make the first Saturday devotion, or other people they think they know the requirements, but they maybe leave out one or two of the details. And lastly, what I want to really what I want to share, other than clarifying some of these things, is some of the motivation behind the devotion, as we'll hear from the Lord Himself. So to begin, I wanted to start. I will go through the requirements kind of point by point, but I want to give you what we have directly from Jesus and Mary. So this is from Sister Lucia's memoirs, Sister Fatima in My Own Words. And on December 10th of 1925, the Holy Virgin Mary appeared to Sister Lucia, and she says, Most Holy Virgin rested on her hand and on her shoulder, and as she did so, she showed her heart encircled by thorns, which she was holding in her hand. And I'm gonna come back to that and read on. That's where we get that image of the Immaculate Heart. And she shows her suffering, and at the end, we hear, "You at least should try to console me and say that I promise to assist at the hour of death with the grace is necessary for salvation. All those who on the first Saturday of 5 consecutive months shall confess, receive Holy Communion, recite 5 decades of the Rosary, and keep me company for 15 minutes while meditating on the 15 mysteries of the Rosary with the intention of making reparation to me." So here we are, where we get the 5 requirements. You probably have never heard that before. I didn't until I started reading this book in seminary. So there's that. In a moment, we're going to go through them one by one, but I want to highlight again where we started. So, these are after the official apparitions of Fatima, and Sister Lucia is a nun now, and she, as I was just reading, she appears with her heart wounded by thorns, and so she's suffering. Right? This is an intimacy. This is part of the Sacred Heart devotion and the devotion to the Immaculate Heart, is that God shares with us His human heart. And He's God, but He's also a man, and therefore He has a human heart that's capable of suffering. And don't we share, someone that we love, when they say, "How are you doing?" And we say, "Oh, it's having a difficult time. My mom died, or these things are going on in my life." But if it's someone we don't really share intimacy with, we're like, "Oh, I'm fine. The weather, my job's good." We don't really share with them because we don't have intimacy. So she shares this, and this is what she said right after what I quoted before, showing her heart in her hand surrounded by thorns. Quote, "Have compassion on the heart of your most holy mother, covered with thorns, with which ungrateful men pierce it at every moment, and there is none to make an act of reparation to remove them." Then the Most Holy Virgin said, "Look, my daughter, at my heart surrounded with thorns, with which ungrateful men pierce me at every moment by their blasphemies and ingratitude. You at least try to console me and say that I will assist at the hour of death." And that goes on, the quote, with the different requirements. So what we see here is there is a purpose to the devotion. That it is to make reparation for the offenses against the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And what's the offense? Well, she's the Queen of Heaven. No, she's not God, but she's the Queen of Heaven. Now, you are offending the mother of Jesus. And it's not only that, she's the perfect disciple. So she's making she participates in the sacrifice of Jesus more than any of us Christians. In fact, all of us put together. Her participation is unique and unrepeatable, because of the graces given her. She's the first disciple. She's the perfect disciple. She shows us how to be the best disciple of Jesus. And therefore, it's analogous. It's analogous that it's kind of a divine offense against God when we sin against Mary. She's not God. That's why I said it's analogous, because of her close relationship with the Lord. And in fact, it is Jesus who wants to establish this devotion. Let me see if I find the other quote about that. So I just read on December 10th, 1925, and in the following year, on February 15th, Jesus appears. The child Jesus appears to Sister Lucia, although she doesn't recognize him at first. And when she finally realizes who it is, he becomes a resplendent child, like the little statues of the child Jesus and the resplendent with light. And he speaks to Sister Lucia. Um, and this is what Jesus says. And you, Sister Lucia, and you, have you revealed to the world what the Heavenly Mother asked you? And having said that, he transformed into a resplendent child. My Jesus, you know what my confessor said to me in the letter I read to you. He said that this vision had to be repeated and there had to be facts permitting us to believe in it, and that the Mother Superior alone could not spread this devotion. Jesus replied, mark his words, because they are also kind of to us. It is true, your superior alone can do nothing. But with my grace, she can do all. It is enough that your confessor gives you permission that your superiors speak of it, and for it to be believed, even without people knowing to whom it has been revealed. But my confessor said in the letter, Sister Lucia again, that this devotion is not lacking in the world because there are many souls who receive you on the first Saturday in honor of Our Lady and of 15 mysteries of the Rosary. Now, let me interject myself a little bit as a priest, because here we do have in our Diocese of Lafayette, many, if not all priests already offer the masses explicitly for the first Saturday devotion. But I certainly have also encountered as a priest an attitude that's similar to this, like, well, we don't really need it. It's it can be put to the side. This is before the devotion was established, so we can kind of understand it. Basically, what the priest is saying is Saturdays back to antiquity were devoted to to Mary. I don't know that it was specifically the Immaculate Heart, but definitely Saturdays for a long, long time. And in the breviary as priests, there's prayers for the office that we say every day on Saturdays to be in honor of Mary. So this is what he's saying, okay? But I want you to hear the words that Jesus says about this, because this is what we really miss in making the first Saturday devotion. So Jesus speaking to Sister Lucia, quote, it is true, my daughter, that many souls begin the first Saturdays, but very few persevere to the end. And those persevere do it to receive the graces promised. The souls who make the first Saturdays with fervor and to make reparation to the heart of your heavenly mother please me more than those who make 15 but are lukewarm and indifferent. Do you hear me? Or rather, do you hear our Lord? Do you see the concern he has for his mother? Now, again, like, does Jesus know that she's not God? Of course he does, right? God has, I think, a dual purpose here. Like, one is for our benefit. We need the first Saturday because we need the intercession of heaven. We're not going to so much go into that today, but we do need it. And the other thing is, the Lord wants God the Father wants, and Jesus reveals to us that it's in his plan that Mary be glorified because of God's purposes for Mary. It's not because she's God, it's because he's God and he has given her these honors and they shall not be taken away. In fact, she hid them in her life. At least that's what St. Louis de Montfort says, that Mary wanted to remain hidden in her life and God accepted her pious request. But in the end, he requires fitting honor be given to her. So, and then of course, we have the offenses directly against Mary that Jesus and Mary speak of, and Jesus wants this reparation to be made to accomplish all of these different things. But did you catch what concerned Jesus? He was sad because many people, they don't finish. And he says the few that do it only for the promises and not to console the heart of Mary. You can tell, like, he's going to honor his part of the bargain. He's not saying, I'm not going to do it because they didn't do it for devotion. But that is what Jesus desires. So if we really want to follow the directives of heaven, that's one of the things that we need to keep in mind. And so with that, let's go back to the requirements and then probably come back to review. So there are 5 first Saturdays that we need to go to. So here is already a question that I encounter at different times. Father, there isn't a mass for first Saturday. And I see that. But Jesus and Mary didn't say which mass you have to go to. She didn't say that it has to be a mass in her honor, like using the prayers of Mary. And that's good because as a priest, there are days where I'm obliged by the church to offer the mass of a different saint or a solemnity of the Lord. Uh, Last year, the year before, the first Saturday was Holy Saturday. So you're not permitted. Anyone can say mass that day. So obviously, the Lord's not going to trump what he's given through the church. So I think we should never be more strict than what the church says. Um, uh, Point being, if there's no mass that you can get to in the morning devoted to Our Lady, well, then go to an anticipated mass. It's still on Saturday, and so it still counts. He said go to the mass on Saturday. He didn't say if it's in the morning or in the evening, and he didn't say about which prayers are for the mass. What's important is that you go and you have, as I'll keep repeating, the intention of making reparation to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Jesus even said somewheres, I don't have it in front of me, but I did read it last night, people complaining that they couldn't get any mass on Saturday. Um, well, he says, well, then go on Sunday. That's kind of like what we have to do when if first Saturday falls on Holy Saturday, no mass can be done. So you either could go to mass on the Sunday, or you could go the next Saturday. I've heard people doing both things. So that's what the church requires. I will give you an example of one pious person that I've met and how they deal with it. Now, they're not a morning person. They really struggle. Like they've tried to get up in the morning, and God bless them, they can't do the morning mass thing. So you know what they do? And this is their choice. They follow what I said before, and they just go to the 4 p.m. mass to make the first Saturday. And they choose, I don't think they're required, but they choose then to go also on mass on Sunday because they feel like they are participating in the devotion better. I don't think that's absolutely required, but I do think it's pious and laudable, and I think the Lord is pleased that they have that disposition. But if you're only able to go to one mass, well, then go to the Saturday 4 p.m. and have that intention. Okay, 1 second here. The second requirement for the devotion is to go to confession. A lot of questions about that. Provided you're in the state of grace, you could and can receive Holy Communion, you could go to confession, either before or after the day itself. But Jesus implicitly says that you can do that, but you need, and this is one we forget, when you go to confession, also you need to have the intention going to confession for making the intention of this reparation to the offenses against the Immaculate Heart. Jesus also answers Lucia's questions that if you forget, well, then in your next confession, have that intention and it'll be good enough. Do you see the theme here? The Lord really wants us to get to what's behind the devotion, and he makes many allowances or excuses for us. Now, we shouldn't be laissez-faire about what heaven's asking, but we shouldn't be obsessing about it in a way either. Okay. We need to receive Holy Communion. So, of course, you got to be in the state of grace for that. So, if you had mortal sin, then you definitely have to go to confession on that day in order to receive communion and make the devotion. Then we are to say 5 decades of the Holy Rosary. This part most people understand. Again, I'm going to remind you with that intention of making reparation. But here's the fifth requirement that most people forget or don't know about. And it's a separate requirement from saying the rosary. And it's that you need to spend 15 minutes accompanying Mary, meditating on the mysteries of the rosary. Now, how you do that, you can do it any way you want. You can meditate on all 15 mysteries of the rosary or those in the luminous mysteries. I didn't include them for the second. You could meditate on one mystery. You can meditate on the mysteries in whatever way you want. You just need to do it for 15 minutes. For me, this is very good because even when I think about the rosary, I've always thought about the rosary as Our Lady taking us by the hand and saying, "Let me show you my son." So I think she has this requirement in there because heaven wants us to enter into the mysteries. And requiring us to take those 15 minutes separate from the rosary is just a reminder or a call to reflect more deeply on the mysteries of the Holy Rosary. Okay? So those are the requirements that we are given for making the five first Saturdays. We should probably also remember why they five. Lucia asked that to Jesus one time. She's like, Jesus, you get 9 Fridays for the first Friday devotion. Why does Our Lady only get you get 9? Why does she only get 5? I remember kind of chuckling to myself when I read her saying this. But Jesus responds, quote, "My daughter, the reason is simple. There are 5 types of offenses and blasphemies committed against the Immaculate Heart of Mary. I'll list them. 1, blasphemies against the Immaculate Conception, which is Mary's being conceived without sin, without any original sin from the first moment of her conception. 2, blasphemies against her perpetual virginity, that Mary was before and after the birth of Jesus a perpetual virgin. 3, blasphemies against her divine maternity in refusing at the same time to recognize her as the mother of men. Here is the what we celebrate on December 1st, that Mary is the mother of God, the Theotokos. Don't have time to go through all the ins and outs of that in the moment, but it is a dogma of the church, which many people scoff at, right? That's the blaspheme. It's blasphemy when God says it's holy and we say it's not. That's a very basic definition of blasphemy. And the fourth offense is blasphemies of those who publicly seek to sow in the hearts of children indifference or scorn or even hatred of the Immaculate. Um, scorn or hatred of this Immaculate Mother. So a very brief example, I wasn't quite a child, but in my years, for a little while, I didn't wear the brown scapula because a friend in high school kind of scoffed at it and was like, "You really think you can just do whatever you want and wear that and you're going to get to heaven?" Like this guy was not living a good life, didn't really believe it, but I didn't have an answer for that. And so I didn't wear it for a while. And that's not explicitly what Jesus is talking about here, because he's talking about children, but people have this attitude also and sow it into children. And the Lord is saying it's a great offense against the Immaculate Heart. And analogously, as I said before, analogously, it's an offense against God. And then the fifth offense is those who outrage her directly in her holy images, right? So people who blaspheme images of Our Lady or destroy them or deface them in some way. We're seeing that more and more publicly, even in our country. And just recently, I think this week, there was a very old image of Our Lady in, I think, New York, and it was destroyed or damaged heavily. I didn't quite get the whole story, but we're seeing that more and more. Um, these are the reasons for the 5 Saturdays that the Lord wants us to make these reparations for. And so it's really Jesus who's asking for this devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And Mary and sometimes repeats it because that's what the Lord wants. Mary only gives us Jesus. In fact, when we praise Mary, and it's fitting that we do so, just like we praise the saints. Why? Well, how can you praise the saints without praising God? Didn't he sanctify them? I mean, I'm certainly not making myself a saint. I'm, I'm praying, I'm doing my thing, but it's God, despite myself, who makes me that way. So when we praise the saints, what we're really doing is praising the work of God in the saints. And when we praise Mary, she's like the saint of saints. And so we're praising God even more. Like, look how beautiful and marvelous you are that you worked this miracle. How could we not acknowledge what God has done? That is also a blasphemy, right? I refuse to acknowledge that Jesus rose from the dead. Well, you can't be a Christian and say that. It's similar when we deny these truths about Mary, because we are denying works of God that the Lord has decreed we need to believe in. So in a few words or many words, these are some of the requirements and background of the devotion of the first 5 Saturdays in honor of Our Lady. And I hope that this helps you all in your devotion and practice. Thank you and God bless.